Hi and welcome to Thete's Mailbox, what I'm now going to be a weekly look at some of the more interesting statements or questions that have been put in comments on my videos or even direct messages to me, and just give a more full response or what my personal thoughts are on it in a way that's not always easy to do as a direct reply into it. So the first one is a bit of a mouthful, so I'll read this one through. So this is to do with the new melee trinkets that I was looking at last week that are going to be coming in Tomb of Sargeras. So this person's not particularly impressed with them. I think there's a particular feature of the Tomb of Sargeras trinkets that a lot of them are going to depend for maximum performance on things that are maybe a little bit out of your control. Such there's one trinket, for example, where it becomes more powerful if more people have it and are close by to you in an encounter. Other ones will be more useful as long as the boss doesn't move. Some of them, it depends on what your health is throughout the fight, and so on. So what they've said here is, I hope they change some of them before release, even though it's pretty imminent. Otherwise, it's going to be a trinket nightmare in Team. They're not going to change them. They may tune them. They're not going to change the effects on them. It's clearly a design philosophy to do this. You know, it's not that they've accidentally designed some trinkets to do this. It's a design philosophy. It's not one that I'm keen on. And my particular feelings on this, I was saying to a friend of mine who was over today again, and I've said this on the channel as well, and I'll probably do another video on it at some point as well when I get tired, is that it seems to me that there are two things in Legion where the design philosophy seems to be very similar, and that is legendaries and trinkets. You know, it seems to me that with both of these things, Blizzard's attitude is design crazy effects on them and have so many of them that in theory we have a choice of which crazy effect we want to use. It's the same philosophy for both those things. So why don't we just combine them? If, for example, we were to if instead of having legendaries or trinkets, whichever you think, let's say we just got rid of trinkets as they are, and we just have legendaries, and those two trinket slots were actually the legendary slots. So you didn't have like legendary boots and chests and cloak and stuff. You just had legendaries that were trinkets, and there were no normal trinkets, if you see what I mean. And they just fit into your legendary slot, and we've got two of them, and we can have up to two legendaries. That all sorts of works. And the benefit of that, as I say, is it means Blizzard don't have to come up with as many crazy ideas. They can just have some crazy ideas. And also, we don't get into difficulties in thinking, oh, well, I'd quite like to use, let's say we're getting to a situation now where some people will be thinking, well, I could use 4 sets of this tier and 2 sets of this tier. Oh, no, but my Bis Legendary's in that, so I can't do that. I've got to choose. Well, if you just had, 2 slots that were for legendaries, legendary trinkets, whatever you call them, then that solves that whole problem. You don't have to think to yourself, oh, I can't wear, or let's say you get, a mythic Titan Forged 925 cloak, but your Bis Legendary is a cloak. It's like, oh, Blizzard, what are you doing to me? That goes away. So we get rid of all that frustration. They don't have to think of as many crazy ideas. That to me would be a much better system. Now, it wouldn't stop us having these crazy effects, by the way. But for me, that would be a tidier system. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, they're not going to make any changes to the way those trinkets work. They may just make changes to the way they're balanced. Like, for example, if they end up being too powerful, they'll nerf them a bit. If they end up being too weak, they might buff them a bit. But I think the effects will stay. Next question. So I guess our Bis relics will change. Even Wrath of the Ashbringer seems weak. It's a ret 1 against Divine Storm damage with this legendary. The thing I want to point out here is about relics. It's a general thing, not specifically for rets. In terms of what your Bis relics are, and it is worth thinking about these now. For a lot of classes and specs, you'll move to a point where it's not just that maybe one trait will maybe not be as good in Tomb of Sargeras as it was, say, in Nighthold. Just as a general thing, if we can be potentially moving to a situation where for some classes and specs, item level will take precedence over the trait more so, then you create a situation where actually you might want to look at item level more closely. And you'll constantly have to sim. And another thing, and I may well do a video specifically on relics that some people might need to be aware of, is because a lot of people want a value for things. They want a value for gear. How valuable is this thing? And with relics, it's always how many item levels is it worth dropping for this trait? And sometimes the answer isn't straightforward, because sometimes that trait is very useful on this fight, say, not so useful on this fight. So the value is variable. So you have to consider what is the value for the particular type of fight that is most important that's coming up, let's say in the next month. And for that, you just need to sort of sim it, really, and try and model that fight as accurately as you can. Next one, so many issues with this review, all based on poor skim reading. So I did a review of raid bots, and some people weren't happy with it. So this is one of the comments. It says, so many issues with all this review based on poor skim reading of what Patreon levels do and how the tools work. Shame as you normally do good works, blah, blah, blah. I did ask, like what, what errors do they think I put into it, but I didn't get a response of that. So I will try and guess. First of all, skim reading what the Patreon levels do, I stated what the first two Patreon levels do, and it wasn't skim reading. I said exactly what they do, which was quite accurate, so I don't know what the issue with there is. The other thing is about how the tools work. I know there were some more specific comments about the tool that allows you to tick various items in your inventory and to sim them, but it only allows you to do so many. Now, what I was arguing, and maybe I didn't explain it clearly enough, is that that facility should not be there because it serves no purpose. Because what I was working out is you can't even tick 2 for each slot to compare. And some people were saying, oh no, but you don't need it for every slot, you just do it for it. There's no point in ticking, say, all your rings in your inventory and getting it to compare that, because there's an item compare later on that does that just as well. What that first ability on raid bots, that first tab, if you want to call it that, looks like it's set up for is it's a way of comparing combinations of gear. And that would sound quite nice, because what would be really useful, it's when you're saying what's best for this slot, is it this item or this item? That's one thing, but when you've got things like tier sets, legendaries and trinkets, sometimes it's not as straightforward as which 2 legendaries are best, because you could say, okay, these 2 legendaries are best with a particular gear set, but actually if I change my set bonus, if I use a different set bonus, maybe these other 2 are better instead, or with a particular trinket or something like that. The way they interplay with each other, all these sort of special items of equipment, is worth comparing. So that's what that'd be set up for. But when you click on all the tier sets you have and all the legendaries you have and all the trinkets you have, it can't do it because there's too many points. And someone was pointing out that, yes, but the thing is, once you get to that many points, it's just too much. It will just take it too long. I'm not saying it should be able to do that. What I'm saying is, if it can't do that, then it shouldn't be there. They should just get rid of it. Because all you're actually able to use that first thing for, realistically, is comparing several of a particular slot piece of equipment. Well, there's another tab for that further down. So that's what I was trying to explain there. It's not actually capable of doing what it sort of would be like it's intended for. But yeah, if anyone's got any specific things that they would like to criticize on it, that's fine, but you have to be a bit more specific. Next one is someone saying, curious how the Blizz dude came up with 25%. Now, what this was about this famous post, semi-famous post, where a player basically had a go at Blizzard saying there's no content in Legion, and a Blizzard community manager came back and said, you appear to have only completed about 25% of the content. I don't think you're really in a position to say there's no content. You can say, if you like, that you're not happy with the content, but you can't say that there's no content because that's factually incorrect, which is true. And indeed, the player was not getting very much support from the community. In fact, when I checked the post, first of all, it had over 100 downvotes, and that may well be net downvotes as well. But what someone said here is, curious how the Blizz dude came up with 25%. I've looked at my main tunes info and WoW Armory, and it doesn't provide such a number, so I can't determine how much I've engaged Legion. I think the issue is here, it's not a specific percentage. It's just a rough thing. This all harks back to something that ended up being in the folklore. Like it's a number pulled out your arse. Most stats, remember, are just numbers pulled out of people's arses. That's all they are. There was a famous stat used in vanilla for when Blizzard was sort of talking about wanting to get more people into raiding, because they said the problem with, I don't think it was a quote from vanilla, I think it was later on, but they said about Naxxramas, the first form, that only, whatever it was, I think it was 1% access Naxxramas, which wasn't actually true. It was far more than that. It was still a small percentage, but it was way more than the percentage they stated. But and it entered into this thing, and people took it literally as if only that many people did it. And later on, the person who said it, I can't remember who it was, actually did say that they were just sort of making the number up. They were just trying to emphasize, you know, put across the point, even, pardon my spoonerisms, that very few people had accessed that content. Most of their players never got to saw any of it, which is true. But yeah, so it's a similar thing here. They're not saying it's 25%. They're saying that they haven't done a lot of the content. You know, this is not someone who's done all of the content and is bored for things to do, is I think what the point of this is. But just as a general point on this one, I mean, this is one of these things where people would get a lot more out of Blizzard. People who feel, I sometimes feel that Blizzard aren't all that helpful in their feedback, but, you know, as a community, we need to be a bit more mindful that you need to make sensible arguments. There's no point in saying something that is factually incorrect. And think of it this way. Let's say someone criticised you for something you did, and they opened up with a factually incorrect statement. You know, are you going to treat their criticism seriously? The chances are no, because for a start, people don't like being criticised, but most, you know, sensible people will accept it if there's something in it, you know, if it's valid. But as soon as you say something that's just clearly not true, it's like, this guy's an idiot. So, and that's what the point of this was. You know, you can say that you don't like the content in Legion. You can say that you don't like the way some of the content's implemented. I'm certainly into that boat. But you can't say there's no content. There's loads of content. I mean, I wouldn't even say there was no content in WoD. But you certainly can't say it in Legion, blimey. Next one is another one on simulation. So, I find it strange people rely on Simcraft so much when it's often terrifyingly wrong. There's so much it simply can't do, and yet people preach it like it's the Bible. It doesn't get anything terrifyingly wrong. What's wrong is people's interpretation of it, and that is not the fault of Simcraft. WoW is a very complex game. Well, any game's complex. I mean, you think about, you know, something even like football. Top teams employ people to analyze stats. I mean, we see on like a weekend, even like pundits on the television who will get up all sorts of impressive data. You can even see heat maps of where different players have been on the pitch, so you can see how much travel time people have had and all sorts. And the same is true of WoW. There's so much data there, and you can't possibly do what might be called napkin maths to work some things out. You can, but then the thing is, I mean, I do this sometimes. You do to try and work something out simply. Just say comparing a couple of talents, and I might do something in a spreadsheet, and I have done that in the past. But then what you're always aware of is other things play into it as well, and you have to be a little bit careful just how much information you draw from it. Simcraft is a way of taking everything into account. However, it is worth noting that, first of all, it is a model. It's a mathematical model for the way something works. And it may be inaccurate at first. You've got to remember the people who are doing it understand their classes really well and are very clever and put a lot of work into it. But they have to rely on people doing lots of testing to get logs, to give them the data, because they have to work it out. Blizzard don't really tell them very much. Occasionally they will clarify something. But Blizzard don't like people knowing how to play the game. They really don't. They've said as much. They don't like the fact that we are so expert now and we have access to expert guides, because it makes it more difficult for them to come up with challenging content. Because the aspect of the content that might be made challenging by the fact that we don't really know how to play our classes has been eliminated. So you have to come up with other ways to make it challenging. So yes, it is a model, but it is pretty accurate after a little while. As long as Blizzard don't change things on the sly, it can end up being very, very accurate. But again, you have to use it correctly and interpret it correctly. So what you see, like at the moment, what's coming out, or you see it everywhere, you'll see people bringing out videos or guides or blogs or whatever on, okay, so how are all the DPS ranking? How are the healers ranking? How are the tanks ranking? And what are they using for the evidence for this? They're using sims. And it just shows a bar. Oh, this one is better because look at the bar. But the problem with that is there's multiple errors in something like that. The first of which is that you've got different people doing the sims for the different specs. Of course, because they're doing the ones for which they are expert. Some of them may be quicker and better at producing an accurate model than others. The other problem is that all these comparison sims, and it applies equally to trinket sims that you might see and relic sims, are all done for a standard patchwork fight, which means pure single target with no movement, no ads, anything like that, and also for a particular time, at a range of time, which may not be the duration of the fight that you are going to experience. All of these things produce inaccuracies. That's why it's important that you do your own sims and you model as closely as you can the fight that you are interested in. Now, but people don't look at that on the comparison. So what is wrong is not SimCraft. What is wrong is people's interpretation of it. Because people ultimately, this is where the problem with stats comes in general, outside of World of Warcraft even. People want to see a number, and they want to see that one number is higher than another, what makes it better. It doesn't always work out like that. If you don't understand how the comparison was made and what the assumptions made are, then you can't really read anything into it, and it could be misleading then. Next one. So this is a bit of a strange one, a bit outside my experience, but we'll go for it anyway. So a bit off topic, I've been struggling lately of choosing between my current casual heroic guild that I enjoy staying because of the nice and cozy atmosphere, which is always nice. However, I like to push my limits by heading into Mythic. I've ran 5 out of 10 so far on another guild. It's tough for me to choose, but whatever option I feel to choose would leave me unsatisfied leaving those people behind. Do I have personal experience with this? Love some advice. I don't have personal experience with that. I have experience of leaving guilds for a number of reasons. Mostly the reason I will leave a guild is for one of two reasons. Either because I'm not getting what I want from it from a raid experience point of view, or in a very small number of cases, because the guild has been toxic as hell. That has only been in a small number of cases. Most guilds have been very, very nice, but if I'm not getting the raiding that I want, then obviously then I would leave it. In this particular case, it is tricky. I gave a quick answer to this, but my fuller answer would be, it is important that you're in a guild of people you enjoy being with. That is more important. There are some people who are not. Like hardcore players tend to have the attitude, I will raid with 19 arseholes just to get the kill more quickly. And some people are okay with that. I'm personally not, and I don't think a lot of people are. You want to enjoy your time with them. However, if you are doing content that is at a much slower rate of progress than you are capable of, you are inevitably going to become frustrated, especially when people repeatedly make what you would consider basic, unacceptable mistakes. Like, people make mistakes all the time, and sometimes they're even funny. No one likes it when people repeat those mistakes, but there are some mistakes that shouldn't even happen once. And if you're in a guild that's way behind where you could be, you're going to see a lot of them, and it can get frustrating. Now, a little bit of frustration's fine. People do get frustrated when they're competitively minded, and you know, you should be like man enough to deal with that. But if it's going to be all the time and constant, you'll probably not enjoy that experience. And if it's going to be like that, then you should probably go ahead. Someone else did actually put in a suggestion that you could always leave some alts in that guild anyway. So you've still got the social experience of being with them, and you could maybe do some stuff on off nights while still enjoying some better progress in the other guild. So it all depends on that, because I say you don't want a frustrating experience. Like anything, it's, you know, World of Warcraft progress raiding, there's a certain commitment required of you to turn up at certain times and to do all the stuff outside of raiding as well. For that, you need the reward of not having a massively frustrating experience. Next one is something else that is outside of my experience, but I'll do my best. Do you think it would be possible to raid normal Tomb of Sargeras without curve? I will try to complete Heroic Gul'dan before blah blah blah, but I don't know if there is enough time. So far I've only done 10 out of 10 normal Nighthold. The answer to this is the answer I could give everywhere. It's not a set thing, of course, because it's got nothing to do with Blizzard. This is to do with individual players. So, when someone is forming a pug group, they will pitch for the best players they can possibly get. You've got to think about it this point of view. When people are doing a pug, they don't really want to wipe. Like in your guild group, you're okay with a bit of wiping because you're all invested in each other. You're all invested in the long term. You're going to be going through this progress together. In a pug, you're not necessarily going to see some of those same people again. I mean, you might invite some of them back again if you enjoy raiding with them. You can make friends with them and so on. But generally speaking, you just want to get through it with as few wipes as possible, preferably no wipes. So how do you achieve this with strangers? You can't possibly know if they're any good as a player. You can't know that. So what are you likely to look for? You're likely to have item level requirements. That doesn't guarantee anything. I mean, we've done pugs like in our guild where we've had so many of us together, but we want a few more pugs. So we've got something. And usually we insist on a particular item level, not because item level must mean you're good, but because if you're bad anyway, your higher item level might carry you through a few things. Because we have no way of telling if anyone is good or not, if we don't know them. And then the other thing is that achievement, that curve achievement, because that at least demonstrates that you, even if you've been carried through it, you have seen the fights and you have some familiarity because someone will have explained the tactics to you. You probably carried out a few of them. They'll probably base it on the assumption that if you'd have died within the first 10 seconds on every fight, you wouldn't have got to the end of it because they would have kicked you. So they're working on the assumption that you have done those fights. May or may not be true. You may have just gone in for the last fight or something, because I think you can get curved for doing that. But they're just trying to stack the odds in their favour. However, although they will try and do that, they will try and get people with high item level, and they will try and get people with demonstrable experience. Equally, they may not be able to get those people, especially for certain roles. So for some classes and specs that are more difficult to get in a pug, like for example healers, sometimes like tanks, maybe specific DPS specs even, like warlocks, maybe in a situation like that, they have to drop their standards a bit. Now, if you happen to play a class or spec that's like abundant, then you're in a bit of trouble. It's much less likely you'd be able to get in without those achievements. But there will always be someone trying to cobble together a pug. And I'm not going to use the argument that some people do. If you put this on a forum, I absolutely guarantee within an hour, some smart ass will say, well, why don't you make your own group? And in theory, that's one way to do it. However, I also understand that people don't want to, and indeed shouldn't, make their own group if they don't know the tactics for the bosses. You know, the raid, you would expect whoever's making the group to be the raid leader to actually be able to explain the tactics to people. Otherwise, you are going to wipe a lot. And if you don't know the tactics to the bosses, then yes, it's not a sensible suggestion to say make your own group, is it? But that's what I would say. I mean, the only thing is if you don't have those achievements or you don't have the requirements that people are going to ask for, it is going to take you longer to be in a pug. You might have to be on all day or something like that. And at that point, I would just think, isn't it better just to join a guild and do it with a guild? Because heroic guilds don't usually have a huge time commitment. It's just a regular thing. So unless you're unable to make like regular times, even for like one night a week, because there'll be some guilds that just do one night a week, but for like normal and heroic progress, that would be the best thing, I would think. But if you can't do that at all, you're just going to have to accept the fact you're just going to have to keep on Group Finder for potentially a very long time. But your best chance is early on. When Tomb of Sargeras first opens up, no one has got any Tomb of Sargeras achievements. Some people sure will have Nighthold ones and they may go with that, but not everyone will. So you just have to see how it goes. But the simple answer is, the short answer is, We don't know because it's down to individual pug raid leaders, and they will always get the best they can. Next one, last couple here. So, loving your content. Also, more cooking videos, please. Yes, I've failed quite badly on that one. They still will come. I did one, like, it was supposed to be my thing for the year. Every couple of weeks, I was going to do a Warcraft-based recipe thing. It was sort of inspired by the Warcraft cookbook, not based on it. I don't even have the Warcraft cookbook. But inspired by it, the idea that, you know, looking through my spell book of cooking recipes, oh, I can actually do that in real life, and I like cooking. So I was going to do those. I did a couple, and it was supposed to be every couple of weeks, and it's not turned out like that, has it? And I can't say that there's going to be one imminent, even though every weekend I intend to do it, but I just end up running out of time doing other things. And also at the moment, my kitchen is not ideally set up for it. I keep wanting to set things up a bit better for filming and lighting and stuff like that. So it is one of the things, they will come, but at the moment I'm not going to be fool enough to say, oh yeah, next weekend, because in theory, yeah, next week I could do it. But I know that next weekend I'm going to be working on my RET Essentials guide, and next weekend, the weekend after, I know it's going to be something else. So I know that probably before summer it's unlikely. I might be able to sneak one out before I've got another 7 weeks of work before my summer break, basically. But when that summer break comes, then I will hopefully catch up a bit. But I say hopefully now. I've abandoned any pretense that, yes, this will definitely be every 2 weeks. That's unfortunate. It ended up being lower priority, I'm afraid. So those are just some of the interesting comments and questions that I've picked out from the last week. I'll do this each week, as I say, try and get it done on Sundays when I can. I know people found it interesting last time. Hopefully you will this time. Keep putting feedback in, and thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.